Welcome back to the Bookly Podcast mini reviews, 3-minute reviews, 5-minute reviews, whatever you want to call them. I felt like the last one worked pretty well. We're still buttoning a few things up, but we're going to go ahead and give this another try with this week's book, The Road. Stick around to know what I ranked this book on a scale of 0 to 5, and if you disagree with me, make sure to leave a comment. Let me know what you liked about this book and what you didn't like about this book, because if there's anything that I know about this book, it's that nobody that I know in real life actually liked The Road by Cormac McCarthy. Nobody. Not any of the people that I see on a daily basis or that I run into, even not on a daily basis, on a semi-regular basis. I asked everybody who's read this book. Nobody in person liked it. However, this book is insanely critically acclaimed. Not only does it have a Pulitzer Prize, and it was chosen for Oprah Winfrey's book club, but it has a 3.99 on Goodreads, which is honestly pretty good. And it has like a, I don't know if I want to say like cult-like following, but kind of like a cult-like following. A lot of people on the internet say that this is the end-all be-all greatest post-apocalyptic story that's ever been told. It was so successful as a book that it actually got a movie in about 3 years after the book came out. So if you're like me and you have no idea when this book came out in 2006. So if you can just kind of reel your mind back a little bit, this book came out around the same time as a couple years before Hunger Games. It came out around the same time as the Lord of the Rings trilogy was kind of starting to pop off, and it was not as far back as I had thought. When I was originally thinking about reading this book, I thought this book had come out, 80s at the latest, maybe even 70s. I thought it was supposed to be like this revolutionary book of the genre. Nope. This book came out the same exact year as World War Z, and the post-apocalyptic trend was already, starting to kick off into, popularity where it is today. Now, I will say that it did predate the Hunger Games, which is, I think, really what catapulted this post-apocalyptic craze into the next level, but it definitely wasn't a pioneer in the genre. However, people treat it like it was. When I say that it has a cult following, I mean that in the most sincere way. People love this book. And even author Stephen King said that Cormac McCarthy, who wrote The Road, was one of the most influential American writers of our time, which is high praise coming from somebody who I would debate is one of the most influential American writers of our time. All that to say, people loved this book. Online, in forums, on reviews, Goodreads, national awards, everybody seems to have loved this book. And yet, for some weird reason, I can't find anybody around me who likes this book. My sister said that this was one of her least favorite books of all time. My mom said it was one of her least favorite books of all time. My wife didn't like this book. I have people who said that they read it in high school and were traumatized by this book. I have friends and relatives who have all said that they absolutely hated this book, and I have yet to find one person who has said that this book was amazing, that it deserves every award that it was ever given. And so if you're out there, definitely let me know what you liked about this book. Now, as far as my own personal opinion, I thought this book was not terrible. I know that's not the most glowing of recommendations, but I don't think it was as terrible as a lot of people make it out to be. This wasn't the worst book ever written. It may be one of the worst books grammatically ever written. People really hate the way that Cormac McCarthy uses punctuation. Or actually, to be more accurate, people hate the way that he doesn't use punctuation, because he doesn't use any quotation marks, rarely uses commas, doesn't use any semicolons. He really is a fan of just using the word and that's it. And then just plopping sentences down together right next to each other. Makes it a little bit confusing to follow, but I actually listened to this on audiobook, which, side note, if anybody wants to debate me on the differences between reading and listening to audiobooks, I will fight you. And if you want to come on my podcast and debate with me, more than happy to do so. But on the audio version of this book, it was a little bit easier to follow, but I have heard from a lot of people that it's kind of a hard book to get through while reading because of his complete lack of punctuation. Now, putting that aside, I do think that this book created a dark and dreary post-apocalyptic world better than almost any other book that I've ever read. So if I had to say one good thing about the book, it was that in a world with nothing, it truly did feel hopeless. And so if he's really trying to get that point across as an author, he nailed it. Like, it really, really does feel hopeless. And it also feels pretty monotonous and mundane. You know, the characters in this book aren't doing anything flashy. They're not, grabbing crossbows and killing people and taking over towns. They're scavenging for food in a house, scavenging for food in a store, scavenging for food in a bunker, scavenging for food, trying to survive day to day, which kind of makes this book repetitive and at points a little bit boring. I'll be completely honest. There were points early on in the story that were kind of boring, but maybe that was an artistic choice because of kind of the monotony of life as it would be in a world where 99.9% of the population had passed away. So that being said, I didn't hate the book. I thought artistically it brought about kind of this feeling of like hyper-realism in a post-apocalyptic world, which I can appreciate. It just doesn't make for a very exciting story. So if you're somebody who chases exciting stories, this is definitely not the book for you. Now, what I will say is that the relationship between the man and the boy at the very end of the book, probably the last 10 minutes of the book, was incredible. Like, that moment in the book was the ultimate payoff in this book that made reading this book worth it, made getting through all of the monotony, all of the repetitiveness worth it. And although it wasn't my favorite book, it wasn't terrible because of that ending. And so I want to say I enjoyed parts of it I didn't like, but I definitely don't think it was, I don't know. I don't think it was Pulitzer Prize winning worthy. I don't think it was revolutionary, or I don't think it was the greatest book ever written, but it also wasn't the worst thing I've ever read. So if you want to listen to my complete review, make sure to listen to this episode of the podcast. And if I had to give it a score out of 5, from 0 to 5, I would give this a 2 out of 5. So again, if you want to listen to why it's a 2 out of 5, if you want to listen to me break down, everything about the book, the different parts of the book, the characters, make sure to check out this episode of the podcast and follow along. Thanks for listening.